Hello, everybody. This is Kumar Pushpak from Echona Services. I head the team here. I'm based out in Bangalore, India, and I have two people with me, Carl Patterson and Tim Giron. Carl Patterson is our today's guest, and he belongs to the quality control systems. He is an expert in that, especially related to drug and manufacturing industry out there. Along with him, we have Tim Giron, who is joining us from Albuquerque, US. So, very warm welcome to both of you, and good afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, so today we'll have a little questions from Tim. Tim, I know Tim is very excited to talk to Carl Patterson, and he will do an interview. He will have his questions with him. So, Tim, how would you like to drive this session?
Let's go ahead and just go with our standard structure, which is I'll start with the questions, and we'll see where it takes us with the topic. Again, let's just get started here, Carl. We introduced you on the last show here last week, but could you tell a little bit about what you do for work and how you got into what you do?
So I work as a quality control. My last position was a manager. I've also worked in quality assurance, so on both sides of the coin of quality. And then how I got into this was uh, around 2003. I was in school in Texas and was working on my degree in microbiology. I was a nurse at the time and wanted to be more either a PA or a doctor. And then for whatever reason, I couldn't get into the school or medical school or whatever. So I came back home. My dad had a heart attack at the time, so I decided to come home and got here at home. And I had this degree in microbiology, and I'm like, wow, there's all these biotech companies here in San Diego. And I grew up in San Diego. I never knew there was anything biotech. I didn't even know what biotech was growing up. So I finally got back here to San Diego in 2003, and I'm like, wow, there's a whole lot of companies just biotech off the record, and they're good companies. Like at the time, there was GenPro, there was of course UCSD, Scripps is out here. So I kind of started looking and just kind of started getting into the industry from there. My first job was at a company called Vical, where they did genomic DNA or DNA plasmid DNA for vaccines, which was very interesting at the time because we had talked about that in my genetics class. So they were using E. coli to produce plasmids, and then once they had isolated the plasmid, they would formulate it into a vaccine to be injected into humans for different diseases, whatever disease that they were working on at the time. So very interesting. I started off in buffer prep washing. I started off in the lab washing dishes and doing all the work, all the grunt work, and then moved up from there, and then eventually moved into quality. So I've seen the gamut as far as positions go. I've basically worked from the bottom up, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. I enjoy seeing the products that we produce, that we're changing people's lives, that we're giving them a better life, and that's something that I enjoy. That's something probably from my nursing experience that I enjoy.
Wow. There's so many questions that come out of that. First of all, you said something that's very interesting, that you were looking for a job, and yet what you found out is you had separate skills that you could actually apply in different ways. We forget this. We go for a job and we realize one job may take 12 or 15 skills. And if we just look at these individual skills in different manners, we realize we're actually able to do many more jobs than just the one we planned for.
Right. So a lot of my nursing job, and even in the military, because at the time I was in the military, a lot of attention to detail. I mean, that attention to detail in the quality department is crucial. I mean, just looking at it and making sure everything is correct and right. And if something doesn't seem right, if the detail isn't there, then we need to go back and take a look at it again. So that attention to detail definitely crossed over when I went from nursing in the military into the biotech industry.
Wow, that's cool. And again, when we build out our resumes, it's I talk to a lot of recruiters, and they always say, it's not necessarily what jobs you have, but how you're able to apply your skills to solve problems. That's
Right,
brilliant.
right.
The next question is E. coli. You're using something that we consider as bad to actually it's is it the fertilizer or is it the
No,
environment itself?
no. So what it is they take an E. coli strain and they attenuate it, meaning they basically remove all the pathogenicity of it, right?
Ah,
So they basically make their own strain of E. coli. They take all the pathogenicity off of it and say, hey, and the reason why they used E. coli was because it's pretty common. It's a common organism that people can pick up and use and stuff. So there are some, as you're using E. coli for manufacturing, there are some things on the back end you have to test for example, endotoxin. But E. coli is very common to use for just some of the basic proteins. I mean, you wouldn't even think about it. I mean, think about how beer is produced, right? So a
well,
lot of the biotechnology manufacturing came from beer production. It
right.
started in with B. Braun, started with some of the other ones that were responsible for making beer, and then we're like, oh, well, we could do this with with beer stuff. So,
Yeah,
needless to say, I'm a
I
beer
was
connoisseur
actually
too, but
yeah, I was actually thinking about sourdough.
mm-hmm,
Because when you make a sourdough starter, if you do from scratch, you don't have any yeast at all. All you have is what? Flour and water and let it
right,
ripen. And you just train the strain to
mm-hmm,
give you the right type of bubbles you need to make the bread magic.
right.
It's and it's in the air around us all the time.
Yep.
It's wonderful to actually involve kids in this experiment, and I know in lockdown a lot of people have been doing this, but to think that you're actually taking things that could be considered dangerous if you're not careful with them, and you're making some wonderful things out of it. Bread, beer, and
Beer, beer, drugs.
lots and lots and lots of good drugs. That's
Yep.
great.
Yep. I mean, there's other systems that they can use to make drugs. There's mammalian cells. You can use mammalian cells.
Mhm.
That's more common for a lot of the complex biologics they use. A lot of your antibodies are done with mammalian cells. One of the companies I worked with was using insect cells for their manufacturing process. So then you don't have to necessarily use E. coli. If the expression is good, you can use other organisms as well that are similar to E. coli.
So this gets me into let's move to where you are right now in the quality control and quality assurance aspect of creating these
Tim,
drugs. What go ahead, Kumar. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, sorry to interrupt in between. I know you guys having a fabulous discussion, but there's one question which has come from a viewer, and I thought it's a very basic question and that needs an answer before people start hearing out in detail. So Carl, yeah, I totally agree with this question. I mean, there is a lot of people who needs a fair understanding between microbiology and biotechnology. I mean,
Right.
are these the two same thing or different, and how different? How would
So
you like to?
microbiology kind of encompasses just about everything, and so you're talking mold, yeast, E. coli, Pseudomonas. You're talking about pretty much everything in general. So my degree is a very general degree in microbiology. Biotechnology is almost like a specialized form of microbiology. So you can actually drill it down to where you are. Microbiology gives you a good general. You can go off into different things with that. but biotechnology is a specialized form of microbiology.
Could you say it uses the technology part? So it sounds like you're building and designing things within microbiology. Is that
Right.
appropriate?
Right, and you're using the microbes for that. You're building a microbe to produce a medication or a drug, or you're using cells, mammalian cells, which not necessarily are not part of something that you would think of microbiology, but mammalian cells are at the micro level, and you're using those to generate your product. So you're using the idea of cells to produce your product, which is, you're right, the technology or manufacturing part.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that differentiates that. And then you were working on the quality aspect of the technology of using these type of microbes to actually build the medicine.
Right. So what we would do on our end is we would test and conduct testing for certain things. So one of the tests, like I mentioned earlier, was endotoxin from E. coli. That is prevalent. You can't get rid of it. That's just the way it is with E. coli. So we would have to test for endotoxin at different stages of the process. So that's where my expertise and my quality part would come in, would be testing endotoxin at different stages of the process.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
I mean, that's very general, and that's just the one example. But there's other things we test for too. But that gives people a good idea of what quality does in this aspect.
Right. So you're basically working with living creatures that you've re-engineered so that they're not too dangerous, but they can grow the medicines. But because they're living, they do consume and they create waste.
That is correct, yes. So we have to check a lot of that. Endotoxin is more of, so just a brief discussion of the process. We make the cells, depending on how the cells are, what your expression system is, you can either express the protein out of the cell or keep it in the cell. A lot of times with E. coli, it's within the cell. So you have to lyse those cells or rupture those cells in order to bring that protein out, and then you can form it on the end. So my job would be to make sure once those cells are lysed that we've got rid of all the cell debris or waste or whatever you want to call it out of the system to make sure that it could go into a person.
Wow. So I worked in inorganic chemistry manufacturing. We were working with the silicon side, and some of the stuff we were manufacturing were like atoms in width. And I understand what it takes to have quality in there. Some of our devices went into heart machines and some of our devices went into military devices, and you have to have a really tight quality aspect. What do you consider quote unquote good quality when you're looking at human medicines?
So I know a lot of times, and probably now, we're starting to take the idea of quality and not put quality at the end of the process, right? We're thinking about quality from the beginning of the process. So as we design our production system, we're thinking, okay, where are the problems that we could have on our current system when we deploy this? When we deploy this, we could have this problem here, that problem here. Looking at proper testing in the process, because I know a lot of times we don't see a lot of that. The people just rush through the process and say, oh, I meant to go test that, but I didn't. So thinking about those things up front is something that to me is very valuable, even to the point where you can go back to R&D and look at R&D documents and say, oh, okay, they were thinking about the quality stuff ahead of time to show that quality was thought throughout the process all the way up until the end of testing.
Right. And it's funny, there's two things that pop in my head. I remember in the early 1990s working in a company, and when I was working in industrial engineering, and there was a poster on the wall that says, quality is built into the way we work. It's not bolted on the outside like an extra inspection. That's one thing, and it resonates totally. But then I remember Philip Kirby. And he was one of the early contributors to the four absolutes, and those are what went into ISO 9000, 9001, the early and the real uniformity of standards. And the two that I'm thinking of, number one, quality is not adding inspection.
Right.
Inspection is there to pick up the lack of quality.
Uh-huh.
Basically, because we're human beings, we make mistakes. And if we didn't make mistakes, we wouldn't need inspection. But quality is built into the way we do our work. That's brilliant. That's
Yep.
brilliant. Now, how did you actually validate quality when you were looking at that? Did you look at your process metrics, or did you look at your results, or was it a combination of both? Did you look at how many pills were, or how much medicine that we're creating that's functional or non-functional, or did you look at making sure you're following process and
It's
procedure?
mostly more that we follow the process that we've built into it already. An example would be like a media fill validation, where we're validating our filling process, right? So we have a document to begin with that has been agreed upon among everybody that says, hey, this is our criteria, and that's pretty much set. The criteria for passing a media fill is set by the FDA, and every process is different. So we have to come up with a good document that has that criteria within the document, as well as we go through the media fill process, we're able to do checks in between. So that process becomes validated once the media fill is successful. So looking at regulatory documents, looking at just my own experience, because I've been through a lot of places, having somebody come in and take a look at your media fill program, all that stuff is very valuable in making sure that that is a complete and robust validation.
Okay. So you're having external auditors, and you were talking about FDA, right?
Yep.
Let's start talking about FDA, because they're a fascinating group to work with. The Federal Drug Administration in the United States actually validate whether or not we're following the right way to make human medicine.
Right.
That's part of what their job is. It's part of their charter. And that's basically, you have to bring in them to make sure, number one, you're doing it right, it's set up right, you're following it, and you're getting the results that you're saying. How does that go about? Do they have a set of instructions that you have to follow? Do you tell them what you're following and they just follow up on you, or is it a combination?
So it's a combination of both. So for us, if you have a very unique process, that's very unique, then you have to kind of tell them and give them the information so that they understand it more, because they're going to come in and they're going to say, hey, look, I want to see how your process is now and how you are managing risk and quality, and where are your control points on it and stuff like that. So if it's a very unique and new process, then they're going to come in and take a look at it. I know a lot of the biosimilar companies have had issues with this because they may be able to produce it, but something may not be right on the end as far as the R&D or as far as the data goes. So the FDA comes in and says, hey, you may want to go back and take a look at this. If it's a pretty normal, consistent process, say for making, I know one of the case studies that I had studied was for insulin. Insulin can be made through E. coli. Well, that's a known process that's been over a period of time. And so the FDA is very familiar with how that works and what you need to do to keep it in control. So it's more of you educating them on your process. If it's a new process, if it is a process that has been around for a while, then you're just kind of giving them the information and they're taking a look at it and they know what to look for. So it's kind of a combination of both. It's very interesting when you start getting a new process and you have to educate the FDA on what your process is so they can understand it more. It's very interesting. I've gone through that at least once or twice already.
Yeah, you're actually educating the experts there, per se.
That is correct.
That's fascinating.
And it gives them, you just have to remember, hey, this is a control point here and this is why we're doing it. And then they'll come back and look at it. Okay, this is the control point here. Yeah, you have it in your procedure. Okay, you're good to go. So, it's very interesting once you get into these new technologies that you're going to have to educate them and bring them on board so they can understand it better.
Wow. So let's move forward a few months. And here we are in the middle of craziness. Okay. We're crazy town, especially in your industry.
Oh yeah.
We have a unique medicine, or I'm sorry, a unique virus that we've been trying to solve for decades and we haven't. And we have a race to find out how we're going to do it
Right.
before it really cripples us economically. How has that changed your day-to-day life in work?
It's going to require us to be more diligent on the quality aspect of it. I mean, a lot of companies, a lot of the big companies have these checks, and they're already in place. They already have an idea of how they're going to manufacture it. They already have an idea of how they're going to package it. They already have this idea of the quality part already built into their process. So they may just need to update a few documents and go along but the really interesting part of this is at the beginning when they're doing the R&D work on this particular vaccine. How did they come about with the right target for it? That is very hard to do, and it takes a lot of time. So I know the FDA is going to have to go back and look at that data and say, hey, show me that target protein that you have produce that antibody for, that it is correct and it will give an immune response. So I think a lot of times in the clinical trials, they also do different formulations of the product as well. They may have different concentrations to show that it was effective. So it's very right now with everything going on. It's going to be time. I mean, just time to develop that vaccine and get it through. I know one of the companies is already on phase 2. That takes time to get them into the people. You have to screen people first. You have to get them into people, get the medication into people, and then you have to have the response, and then you have to collect the data before you can go on to phase 3. So that could take some time. I mean, a vaccine by November or by the end of the year, I find that hard to believe. Knowing this industry and how this industry works, I find that hard to believe unless there's some technology that one of the big companies are using to move that forward. To me, I find it a little bit hard.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And go ahead, Kumar.
no, just came in because this is related to COVID, and I'm eagerly waiting for a vaccine too, like all others, right? So, Carl, tell me, since you just discussed on the pattern and the process in terms of the quality checks and the controls out there. Uh, Now, how come all the companies? I have seen companies from most of the countries, maybe Israel, US, or UK, or India, right? Every country has been claiming that they are on the verge of making vaccine and they're going to make it public. How could they do that if at all people like you understand the process? Are they just buying out time? Is this what
Yeah,
they are doing?
so making the vaccine and having an approved vaccine are two different things. That's two different things. Making the vaccine and saying, "Oh yeah, we have the data to show that it's effective," and putting that and converting that into people is something completely different. Because I know a lot of sometimes with new treatments and stuff too, getting it into that clinical trial. You don't know how many companies I've heard or been with that have they get through the trials and they get to that final point, and then all of a sudden, our phase 3 failed. It didn't meet the criteria that we needed it to meet. So, having a vaccine made and having an approved vaccine are two different things. So they're really just buying time, like you said, Kumar. So just buying time so that they can get it in and get it going. So yeah, making a vaccine and having an approved vaccine are two different things.
Yeah.
Right.
And
For our, sorry, Tim, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, I just wanted to have a related question. Uh, Carl, for our viewers and for all of us, would you be able to explain the process right from the day the vaccine starts gets building till the time when it goes to public?
Right,
What are the
right.
stages and the processes it has to go through?
So the process that it has to go through. So you have a phase 1. Sometimes you'll do preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Preclinical is just like an animal study to make sure that it's okay. Phase 1 goes into humans to show that it's safe and effective. Phase 2, you do like a safety and efficacy to show that it's even further safe. Phase 3 is when you go into basically the general population. So you have to make product for each of these trials, and then that product has to get approved through the contract manufacturer. Then it has to go to a clinical research company. Then they have to distribute it out based on their clinical research protocol. And then once it goes to the different areas where they have patients, and the patients have to come in. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, not only from the manufacturing side, but also for the clinical research. So the reason why I know a lot about the clinical research is my wife she works in clinical research, and she's done that for a long time. So a lot of times I've helped her with things as well, where it just takes time. It's going to take time to find out how you may have a good vaccine that shows good on your data and on your science side, but it may not necessarily translate into the population. So that does take some time.
Do you have a time frame, Carl? If I have to ask you, what is an average time frame for a vaccine to
I know for
come to the
most
market?
drugs, there might be, with the
Mhm.
vaccine that we have now, they may be able to shorten the timeline a little bit. They give it priority as far as manufacturing stuff goes, and the FDA will look at it, as it's being done. But usually, a drug from once it hits to clinical research into manufacturing, usually takes 7 to 10 years. Yeah,
Oh,
it takes some time. It does take a lot of time, and that's why if people knew how much time and effort it takes to go into it, they might understand what the money is, because basically a company who's producing the drug, they're basically forking that money out until they're able to make it commercial. So it's kind of you want to make it safe, but you don't want to waste all the money, and so
it's billions of dollars getting something to market. And then what do you have? 10 to 20 years that you can have a trademark on it?
Yeah, and then after that, then it goes to another. Then people can take that information and then they can make it out for a generic. Correct.
Yeah, wow. This is a hard business to run. I commend the pharmaceutical industry for actually staying in the black for the most part.
Now, granted,
yeah, and that's about. Go
there
ahead.
are certain technologies that you can put into place that have helped and will speed that along. One of them is process analytical technology, which basically reads the system as you're producing it. It'll give you data. A lot of I'm working on with data science, data visualization, so I can take data and make it quicker for people to review and look at and get make decisions on it. So there are a lot of technologies in place that you could put in place to get it to where it could be shortened, but definitely the 7 to 10 years. Yeah, that's pretty much standard right now.
It's the norm. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Yep. Wow. So this is what you're going through now. We've had coronavirus studies and research, and we've been following that for probably decades inside the research facilities. Why have they not actually been able to get a vaccine for the coronavirus until now?
Probably because it wasn't very profitable. I mean, it boils down. That's what it boils down to. So
I
that's
agree
the only
with
thing.
you. It's a sad fact, but they only have so much money, and they only have so much time, and they have emergencies. And what right now are the biggest threats to humanity? Before coronavirus, what were the big threats to humanity? Cancer. Yep. Blood pressure and strokes and heart attacks, right?
Yep.
So that's where the money was.
And it's not
it's not companies being wealthy. It's companies trying to figure out how to prioritize the medicines that need to go to market first.
Right. Yep.
And then and Kumar and I have been talking to people in other industries for weeks here. And then all of a sudden you have to reprioritize. How quickly do you see this happening in your work environment, where they said, okay, it's not necessarily you're in lockdown per se, but you have to make a 90-degree turn? And what was that like from a mindset change inside your work environment?
So for me, it's I'm used to. It's odd because I'm used to making those changes. Somebody comes to me and says, "Okay, your priority today is this." Okay, well, I just need to adjust what I call adjust fire, and move along. And then some projects may move behind, some projects move forward. So there's a constant. Me being in the contract manufacturing industry for years, there's always a constant change. Always a constant. So your priority today is this. Your priority is that. We need to work on this. We need to get this out. So there's always that change. That's always there. That fluctuation. You just have to kind of learn. Okay, I got my marching orders. This is the way I'm going to go. Okay, and adjust fire.
So yeah, you're saying that this is another day at work for you.
Yes.
Mercy. Oh, wow, that opens up a whole different discussion. So, this actually is really interesting. Now, I do have a couple other questions I need to ask. And Kumar, if there's any questions coming in from the audience, please interrupt me. But there's two things that I always think about and ask about. Number one, with the lockdown itself, has it changed your work habits, or has it changed anything? Do you have to do more work from home, or are you deemed a critical function where you have an office you have to go to?
So when I was with the last company I worked at, we had offset hours. So I would come in a little bit later in the day. So I would come in at noon and work from noon to 6. My cohort, she would come in the morning at about 6 and work from 6 to 12. So, and then the 2 hours or so that I had, I would work from home. I could get up, work from home. At the time, the kids were in school, but they were doing it here. So it was a little awkward here. So I'd help the kids get my work done, go to work, and then the rest of the day I was at work. That definitely has changed. We don't have nearly as many people on site. I seem to be getting more done in the 2 hours I'm at home, because because nobody's really bothering me. I'm able to get the work done and get it out and get it going. And then I go in just so I am a leader. I am a manager. I need to make sure that my people see me and they know how. I need to know how they're doing, how things are going with them as well. So. Yeah, it's definitely changed my workload. I expect it to be more where I see the workload going now. Before, I know working from home was kind of frowned upon. It wasn't like, okay, yeah, you're working from home. No, you are definitely working from home. And I think a lot of companies are going to go to that now. I think they're going to be able to say, hey, we really don't need you here. You can work from home, and your day could be half there or half here in the office, whatever you need. Or it could be all day at home. Just make sure you attend the meetings and stuff like that. I think that is completely going to change. I think it's going to change to where more people are going to be able to work from home now and not quite have the stigma of, you're working from home.
Yeah,
it's definitely going to change.
I think the working from home before February 2020, it used to be considered as a privilege, not a necessity. Now it has
Right.
become a necessity, though. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, and again,
Sorry.
because of the type of work you do, you're going to have brick and mortar.
Yep.
Moving forward, you have to have the labs. You have to have a controlled environment for the growing and testing and managing. But
Right.
at the same point, the office space, the administrating functions, you see it basically being moved out to the outer skirts.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely a lot of my administrative and you're right, basic office stuff is all could be done from home. Quality, has to be on site when they're manufacturing, and I completely agree with that. And I think we should. There's no way, unless you're going to put cameras everywhere, and then everybody is a little paranoid about that. Quality has to be on site. Quality has to be there and has to be able to monitor. And if there's an issue that comes up, quality has to be there to put in their 2 cents and go from there. So yeah, quality will always need to be there unless things change drastically again. But quality will definitely need to be on site.
Okay, cool. So, wow. So what, do you have any more questions right away, Kumar?
No, not at the moment.
Okay.
But people keep sharing your questions if you have any to the chat window or drop in an email, and we'll pick those up with Carl right away.
So Carl, there's we've talked about the manufacturing part and we've talked about the quality part. Now, what would you like to educate the public about more about just your industry and how it functions, so that we can have a little bit more comfort? Like Kumar was saying, there's a disconnect between what the news is saying and what's really happening behind the screens.
Right. So, that the companies are committed to producing an effective product and that they want to ensure that quality is built into that product. So, the quality part of it will always have to take precedence a lot of times, because if you have a problem with quality, that could not only cost you a lot of money if something goes wrong, but you have to do the quality up front first. So making sure that quality aspect is there is, to me, is very important, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to take this medication. We're going to have to put it into people, and maybe my grandmother or my mother, quality. Here's a good quality check for everybody. Would I feel comfortable putting that medication into my mother or my wife or my kids? And if the answer is no, then maybe you need to kind of think about that a little bit before you move forward. Definitely, for sure, that quality is utmost and very important to the pharmaceutical industries, and putting it out there for that process and making sure that quality is in check is what we've lived for. So
yeah, there's a traditional quality framework called Six Sigma, and one of Six Sigma's objectives is removing defects from 6 standard deviations, which means that if you have 1,000,000 pills, you're saying it's acceptable for 3.4 of those 1,000,000 pills to be defective. And and
it's a hard pill to swallow.
well, and again, in my industry that I was supporting, we were looking at 9 and 12 sigma.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have a microprocessor fail. You
Right.
cannot have a microprocessor in a heart device or in a military guidance system.
Right.
You can't have a fail. So we're working on 9 and 12 sigma. What's the level of accuracy or precision that you were looking at, or were you trying to constantly obtain perfection?
We were constantly trying to get to that perfection part, because you're right. If I have that one dose that is not right, it's going to cause problems. So trying to make sure that you get that sterile product, and until we get to a point where we can check for sterility 110% on all the products that go out the door, which we can't right now. You have to make sure that as you're writing your media fills and you're thinking about contamination control and stuff, just you have to kind of keep that in mind. So, for a lot of the times, the drugs are 100% out there, have to be effective. So,
and to actually add to your statements here, we're not talking about inorganic chemistry anymore. We're talking about gardening.
yeah,
You're actually growing a garden with your microbes, and you're having to prove this in when you're working with actual life that's competing with you,
right.
and is actually doing the opposite of what you're trying to have happen.
Right. So there are some technologies that'll bring up one of the big tests that out there is what they call sterility test. Sterility test traditionally takes 14 days to get a good result, or to ensure that your product is safe. So if you can cut using technology, if you can cut that 14 days to 7, or some other way of doing it, and they do have technologies out there that'll do it, then that'll not only ensure the quality of it, but ensure that, hey, yeah, I can cut the time without compromising quality. That's some of the technologies out there that our companies are kind of working on. I worked on that technology with one of a combination device company that I was working with.
So I have a little story that's really cool about this in the history of quality. There was a guy by the name of Shewart, Deming and Shewart, right?
Yep.
And do you remember reading about his memo in the early 1920s in Bell Telephone?
Oh, no.
Yeah, everybody
Like,
who takes Introduction to Quality
right.
Learns this. And he wrote a memo inside of Bell Corporation, and they were having such problems with the quality of their voice carriage. And he said, this statistical control science and the statistical control systems that were growing in the late 1800s, if you take your data and you apply something called the normal distribution and the central limit theorem,
right.
you can do some really interesting things with the data. This was a black swan. And it not only changed the way they were testing and evaluating and able to fix things with the Bell Corporation, but it accidentally got onto the universities. And the professors in all the universities around the United States got really excited about this, and they taught their students about this too in quality. And so one of the professors was Polya. And Polya was a Hungarian mathematician in Berkeley, and he brought Greek heuristic, scientific method, and scientific analysis back to industry. And one of his students was von Neumann.
Yeah.
But the other students who were going to other universities were people like Drucker, were people like Deming, and people like Duran, and they ate this stuff up like crazy, and they were putting all these theories together. And so when these guys were going into industry and trying to talk to the industries to listen to them, it was a huge letdown. And when MacArthur said, okay, it's the end of World War II, I need some help rebuilding Japan, I can't even imagine how excited they were to try out these theories.
Japan and try it out in Japan. That's one of the stories that you hear from Six Sigma, how Duran and Deming went to Japan and worked with them in Japan and used all those theories and used all those tools in Japan, and then now they're trying to develop it back here. Because it worked so well in Japan. You're like, well, you just would have done that in the first place, but
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is a black swan. And what you're talking about is these new technologies that you're learning to actually circumvent the time it takes to actually do these trials appropriately.
Right.
I'm not asking you to predict these type of black swans, but do you think there is an opportunity in the pharmacy industry right now for a black swan to immediately occur?
So one of the things that I've started to look at, and I've seen it at a couple places where people have used programming, data processing, data science, the data science realm of that's going on right now, where you could take data and the pharmacy industry, our industry. I mean, within the years, they still use Excel. They still use Excel, and Excel is okay. I'm not against Excel, but it does take time to use and to master. But now there's technologies out there like Python. I use Jupyter Labbook for programming. You can make a program, and you could wrangle the data. They call it data wrangling. You can wrangle the data to make your graph rather than it taking click, 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 click. Now you can just create the graph with the program and dump it into Excel or wherever you need to dump it in, and then have that data quicker. You could make decisions faster. Having to make a decision, after you've collected all the data. Say we make a product and we have to test it, right? So here, usually it takes about 30 days after you've manufactured to get the testing done and together and to release. If I can take the data that I've already generated for that lot and say, okay, based on the data that I have, I would get this for this test or this for this test, you can almost get to the point where you could let it go. I mean, where you could say, okay, unless I see something out of the ordinary, which I will not, I can go at. One of the things that that I've talked about before is what they call parametric release, where a lot of times it's and where I've seen this at is I've seen it in the sterilization industry, with products like your surgical products, where they need to be sterilized in order to go into the to be used for surgery, and they'll set a set of parameters. If that lot that you're sterilizing at the time is within those parameters, after it's done, they'll let it go. There's no reason to test it. You may have to come back after a certain period of time, and just to kind of say, yes, it is okay. We're just covering our basis. You may have to go back and do it, but a lot of times that parametric release for that product is enough to go through, as long as you validated it and show that it does work.
Now, I know working with the Federal Drug Administration is a non-starter for innovation for the most part. Let's assume it is. It takes years to actually make changes in your processes with the FDA once they're established, and there's reason for this. How receptive is the pharmacy industry, at least your part of it, to these innovative changes?
It's the same thing, same thing with the FDA. It just takes time.
Okay.
If we put an innovative technology or innovative data science course, say, where we can cut the time in half for lot release, and we use some sort of innovative technology, it's going to take some time for the FDA to be comfortable with it. Couple of things I have seen where, when I was talking about the 14-day sterility test, and they were able to cut it down with 7, that has taken a lot of time for people to kind of understand that and implement it. And not only that, but it's taken the FDA a long time to kind of accept it. Some companies are able to do it. A lot of times the bigger companies are able to do it because they have the money and the manpower to do it. Smaller companies, I haven't seen that really kind of take hold yet. So innovation and change in this industry does move slow, and there's a reason why, because people are kind of concerned of the quality of the product. How is that going to affect the quality? Will it affect the quality? And then how do we document that?
Yeah, there's and that's the dilemma. There's, again, we have the opposing dynamics of an industry that says we are manufacturing, we have to create a repeatability, and that's repeatability in effective medicine and repeatability in medicine that doesn't hurt people either. And
Right.
at the same time, we're saying we need innovation, and you need both. It's a tough play to be in the middle of those, especially working where you're so close to human life.
Right.
I commend you guys for that. Okay. Wow. Any more comments or questions, Kumar, from your side?
No, not at the moment. Yeah, you can go ahead. I'm just waiting for the people to come up with questions, and then I can interrupt in between.
Okay. So this is really wonderful. If you were to actually talk to somebody who was in your position when you started this industry, what would you have recommended?
Oh, I would recommend keep learning. Just keep learning, because with courses and with new technologies and school. So for me, it seems like there's a big. I don't know if it's just the way the universities are. There seems to be a big disconnect between going into this industry from the university, right? You come out of university, you got a degree, you're like, okay, I could do this, this, and this, and then when you get into this industry, you're like, yeah, I can do that, but I need to know about this too. So there's a lot of disconnect between coming out of the university and then going into this industry. So I'm glad there are courses or companies that I work with that do the webinars in order to inform people on some of that. So this is really, I mean, I would just keep learning. Everything changes. If you're starting to get new into the industry, there are certificates that you can get. There are courses you can take. I definitely would recommend getting as much learning as you can, because this industry is always changing, and you're going to have a gap between once you get out of the university until you come into industry. I could not believe. Like I said, when I got out of the university, there was like FDA. What's a what an inspection? I have no idea what I'm going to do here. What, I don't understand. So I think if somebody coming into my industry now, if they look and they start learning about this stuff up front and start getting into the courses and stuff ahead of time, it's going to help them in the long run to help them understand more of the industry, and therefore understand why we have the quality and why we have to do it. Because I've had people from the university who just come to me and they're my basic technicians, and I have to teach them everything kind of over to show them, hey, this is the way we do it. We follow this procedure. We follow, we have to fill out this document, and this is why we're doing this. So just kind of learn as you go along, and as you're coming in, learn as much as you can. That's
Wow.
important.
So it's and I have a couple clarifying questions on this too. But from a general question, you're starting to get into, there are business knowledge that you need to collect that would be really valuable for you hitting the ground running.
That is correct.
And there's another part that are non-business skills or even general skills. What type of general skills did you find that you were surprised you're using a lot that had nothing to do with microbiology or nothing to do with pharmacy?
So for me, just my leadership skills, just leadership and communicating. A lot of it was, leadership from the military and how that conveys into the business. A lot of people don't understand a lot of the business, and through the years, I've read and I've studied business a little bit. So it's not, I'm not an expert, of course, in business, but at least I have an idea of what they're trying to establish. And I think a lot of times coming out of school don't understand the business side of it either. So I think that's something that people need to kind of understand. And then just a lot of learning how to communicate too. That helps as well too, especially if there's an issue or if there's a problem that needs to be brought up, communicating that right away, quickly, and not being afraid to bring that up. A lot of people have, if something goes wrong, they're like, I'm not telling my boss. Unfortunately, in this business, if something goes wrong, it could have a big impact. And if you have a right boss, the boss will be like, okay, no problem. Let's take it one step at a time and let's take a look at it. So they're not nearly as judgmental. They're not, it's just a matter of, okay, let's move forward with it. Let's fix it. We know we identify the problem. Let's fix it. Let's move forward. So,
the reason why I chuckled, Carl, was I teach a credential, or I teach a set of skills, project management, right? And I teach along the framework that's promoted by the Project Management Institute. Now, in 2015, they published an edict to all the project managers, and they said, you got to double down in business and your business knowledge, and you got to double down in your leadership skills too. And so it sort of resonates with me. I'm saying, okay, here's another data point.
Here's another something that says,
yeah, this is real. This is real. So you're validating what actually I've been living through. And again, I'm doing a rough, this is what's scary to me. I'm doing a rough survey of all my classes. My classes are huge right now. 20% of the people cannot say that they have what they consider a good manager and leader, or I'm sorry, 80% of the people cannot say that they have a good manager who is a good mentor to, somebody who demonstrates good management and leadership, and somebody who's willing to spend the time to help them grow. Only 20% of the people going through my classes can say, yep, I know who they are and I spend time with them. Yep. Isn't that scary?
Yeah, that's scary, because a lot of it is just for whatever reason, and I believe in the mentorship idea and how to mentor people and bring people on, and helping them. It's not only helping them to bring them up, but and it's kind of selfish. Yeah, if I bring them up and they do a good job, then it looks good on me as well, right? but that's my idea, is that I want to bring those people up. I want them to learn. I want them to know, because in the back, on the back end, they won't give you quite as many problems if you mentor them correctly and you take an interest in them. They're going to help you. They're going to want you to be their leader. They're going to want to be around you, and they're going to want to do their best for you. So mentoring and doing that is very important. We've all had bad bosses, but we've all had good bosses too. So learning to take
Mhm.
those strategies from our good bosses and not doing the bad ones will make us better leaders.
Yeah, and again, if we can't do it for a wider organization, we can do it within that environment within which we have control. And if we
That is
don't
correct.
have that, we can lead ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah, on this, Carl, I have a question related to academics since we are discussing on this. I know that you are also a trainer and speaker out there. Uh, so if somebody wants to learn the skills, and we just discussed about the knowledge versus skills when it comes to the quality control in pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. Uh, what do you recommend? Or I want to understand if there is a specific kind of degree or a diploma that person has to actually do it in order to ensure that he can be a quality controller, or is there something that you can actually plan in a course or crash course something? I mean, what do you suggest, or how you want to take this?
So there are courses that you can take outside of the university, certificates that you can take. Here in San Diego, there's quite a few that you can take to kind of give you that skill set, to give you that understanding. They're through UCSD. I think there's one through Mira Mesa College. So there are outside classes that have that hand-on skill set. Um, Trying to do that on an online like this is very difficult, because you need to see how people are able to do it. Um, I've known places that'll actually send people to a class and they learn the skills as well. Some of the industry leaders, I think Millipore and uh, BioMariU have classes where you can learn their skill sets. Learn that skill set, learn how to pipette, learn how to streak a plate. What kind of things do you need to do in order to do an endotoxin test? There are companies, or like I said, institutions that will do that for you. For us, it's just giving you the information and trying to have you learn that information. And then we can always in the pharmaceutical industry, you are trained, and we don't let you do the assay until we feel that you're comfortable enough to train. So training, if you're already trained, it won't take nearly as long for you to do the assay. But if you're not trained, it's going to take some time. So definitely, there are courses out there from other places. Definitely, the courses here help as well, to kind of give you that knowledge. So.
Yeah, and there's general quality groups out there too, like in the United States, American Society of Quality, ASQ. I'm not promoting them above any others, but there's lots of them. And even within the pharmacy industry, you have
Right.
nonprofit groups who are chartered to promote the education. So there's lots of channels you can go through.
Right. So there's associations like ISB, International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers. They have classes that you can take. PDA, Parental Drug Association, they have classes as well. Just realize that those classes are they're expensive. I mean they're expensive. But there are classes out there that will give you what you need and the skill sets that you need.
I also heard you talking sometime back uh, related to data science. I know
Mhm.
it's all about collecting data and analyzing data when it comes to quality control. So, what sort of data were you referring to? What sort of
So
data you collect?
So for me, I work as a pharmaceutical microbiologist. I work a lot with environmental monitoring data. So that's where we go to the rooms. We take samples, air viable samples, non-viable samples, surface samples, and then we, do the tests, and we collect all this data. So as part of that, we have to report on that data too and analyze that data. So that's what I was referring to, was looking at that data constantly and creating a data science program or working on a program to make it to where it's easier to work with. A lot of times, a lot of companies, what they do with the data is they put it in a spreadsheet and don't think about how it's being put in, or is it easy for the operator to put in. The easier you make it for the operator, the faster it's going to be. So for me, starting at the beginning where data needs to be entered needs to be considered, as well as what you're going to do with the data after it's entered. So for me, environmental monitoring data gets entered. I have to make charts on it. I have to create a report on it. And that takes a lot of time with Excel. With data science, I'd like to streamline that a little bit to where it doesn't take nearly as much time. So that's the data I was referring to. And you can do it with all other data too. You can do it with bioburn data, endotoxin data. You can do it with some of your quality testing and process control testing data. You can look at all of that, and then you can look at it and kind of see where, in terms of data science, especially when we talk about SPC, statistical process control, you can kind of look to see if there's a pattern, or maybe it's going to go out of process, or however. So there's a lot of data that needs to be collected. I think the data science part of it is something that needs to be brought in to the pharmaceutical industry so that they can get a better understanding of their data and their process.
Right, right. Another question that comes to my chat box here is, what do you recommend when writing procedures? What
Okay,
type of recommendations you have?
so one of the classes that I have is really the FDA just says, hey, you have a procedure, you have to follow it. Okay. And then for writing a procedure, I call it the 3 C's. I call it clear, concise, and compliant. Clear means that I want it to be easy enough for the operator to understand. Concise means I want it to be technically accurate, but I don't want it so technically accurate it's confusing. If it says push button A, I need to push button A, not A, B, C, and D. And C, compliant, meaning your own company will have a format that's required for it to be compliant. And then those are pretty much the 3 C's that I teach in the class that I have, and that's where you should start.
And what are the key points that you'd like to highlight while writing or pen down the investigations when you have to create a report on that? What are the
So
key points you'd like to highlight?
some of the key points is just make sure that the investigation is thorough, that you've looked at everything. You'll in Six Sigma we have the fishbone diagram, the Ishikawa diagram. So that gives you a good idea of where to kind of bucket what you're looking at, and it puts it in a format that's a lot easier to use when you're doing investigation, as well as reading, readability. Because not only do you have to think about it from your perspective, you have to think about that document and how an auditor is going to read it. Is it plain enough for somebody to read that and not have a problem? Do I need to put a little more detail? That's why it's important to make sure that a lot of people take a look at it to ensure that the basis is covered. But think about it as an investigation on where to start would be, the Ishikawa diagram is a good point. And then also think about it as far as from who's going to be reading it. Who's your audience is what I'm saying. Who's going to be looking at that document down the road. So those are really 2 key points when it comes to investigations that are very important.
Fishbone diagram, it's a great tool of representations, isn't it?
Yes,
makes
I mean you have to kind of know what you're doing and how you're going to use it. I've used it in different ways under different investigations, but like I said, that's definitely a good basis for your investigation.
And also, Carl, if you'd like to highlight some of the observations that you see the regulatory body like FDA has notified during these kind of procedures.
So one of the things, the biggest observation from the FDA is you're not following your procedure. Your procedure says this, and
I mean, most of the agencies come back and says, yeah, the same
that's
words,
kind of like
isn't it?
catch-all. That's like their catch-all. We're not going to get you on anything else, but we're going to get you on this. So it's like, oh, okay.
I mean, any agency you go, any agency you invite them to come and check the logs. I mean, I have found 9 out of 10 times the first thing they come up and say that, hey, you know what? You're not following the procedures right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why it's important, especially on that observation, is to make sure that you're writing, you're following those 3 C's that I mentioned, and then also that if it says to document this, make sure you have a form for it, because I've seen it where times where procedures say, okay, document this here, and then you go to look for where you need to document it, and there's nothing there. So just make sure that what you're putting out in your procedures matches and that it makes sense. And then have like I said, have a couple people take a look at it. One of the most important things that I've done is have the operators take a look at it and have them see it, have them make their corrections, and then I can go in and do whatever technical or administrative changes that need to be done. But definitely, if you follow the 3 C's and everything makes sense, then that'll definitely help you to not get one of those observations.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Great. Tim, you have further questions?
Oh no. My brain is full here. This is great, Carl. Wow, this actually has given us a broad and a deep understanding of what's going on that's impacting the world, as well as a look into what your work is like and how you got into it. We can't thank you enough for it.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me. I mean, this has been, I enjoy talking. If we had this again, I'd be more than happy to come on.
Okay, we'll listen to our audience. We'll listen to our audience for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there would be questions coming on the way after they see it again and again. We will like to have you again sometime next uh, week. Yeah, let's circle in and let's take some questions then. But for today, I would really like to thank you for taking time out and discussing this. I mean, some of the good points and the questions we discussed. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim, for joining in.
As always, it's a treat.
Thank you, Carl, again. Enjoy your day and talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
people.
Kumar. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you again. Have a good day, everyone.